We're in the Assessment and Demographics Department. We're here today to talk about KSDE test security and ethical testing practices. Here's some of your major takeaways for the day. We'll talk about prepping, documenting text to speech, turning in a test schedule, actively monitoring, proctoring tests. Be sure to check the end review screen, monitoring testing progress, test security, reactivations, and test materials, and do a little bit on the ethics of testing. All right, so there's really nothing new in terms of which grade levels are tested. ELA and math are grades 3 through 8, and then grade 10 in high school. Science is grades 4, 7, and 11, and history and government is also grade 11. You want to talk a little bit about interims?
Interims really haven't changed much. They work the same as they have in previous years. So all the students should be loaded in there, and they're tied to any teacher that has a license number. If teacher doesn't have a license number, you're not going to have a student inside the kite. Last year for predictives, no more predictives after this year.
All right. The test windows are for KELPA, January 29th to March 8th. February 5th to April 26th for the DLM students. March 18th to April 19th for ELA, math, and science. April 22nd to May 3rd for full-time virtual students. And then the history and government and social studies test is administered during the school year and graded by the teachers of the school year. Probably the biggest thing that we would emphasize is the accommodations have to be noted on the P&P, the personal needs profile, prior to the student logging into the test. And I believe there's some changes this year with how that works.
Yes, this is something that you're really going to have to be aware of. Getting a test reset by KSDE will probably not happen this year. So you have to make sure that the right student has the right ticket and that all their P&Ps are in kite prior to the student ever logging in. So if Joe gets Bob's test and he's supposed to have text-to-speech on there, and if they log in using the wrong test ticket, you're stuck. And same thing as far as not getting that text-to-speech in there. Student logs in and that's not selected prior to logging in, you're stuck with it.
Test sessions for KELPA, there's 4 domains of variable length. DLM, they select 7 testlets.
Correct.
For ELA and math, 9 testlets for science. Math, ELA, and science are 2 sessions, about 45 to 60 minutes in length. History, government, social studies is a classroom-based assessment. The KELPA is required for all identified EL students, even if they're not receiving services. The change this year
is DLM students have to take their version of KELPA, and that will be done offline. SPED department will take care of that, so don't worry about it.
All right, on the KELPA, it's grades K through 12. They're linked to a specific proctor, requires integrated headsets. The speaking and writing portions are scored by proctors and teachers. The SC codes, those are the special codes, are due March 1st, and all scoring must be completed by March 29th. You want to say anything here about DLM for us?
Nope.
Okay. It's for reading, math, science, and history and government. Requires the completion of a first contact survey, an educator portal. Students enrolling after March 18th with an alternate DLM type do not need to be tested, and that's for this year as well as last. The IEA integrated.
Yeah, that's the fall window. Don't worry about it.
It's
That's
already done.
passed.
And then the summative is February 5th to April 26th. If a student enrolls on or prior to March 17th, 2024, the count for AMOs must be tested. After that date, the count for participation if tested, and that's your choice. Just let us know. We're going to assume that you do not want to test them. If you have a new student that you want to test, just let us know. All right, tell them a little bit about the test tickets.
Test tickets are the same as they've always been. I'll generate them the week of spring break. And so, you know, the elementary kids will just have one ticket. Secondary will have a separate ticket for each content area.
The personal need profiles need to be completed by March 10th. We'll send out an announcement in the principal's update when the P&Ps are available. The test tickets are created by Mark Saylor and they'll be sent to the schools after March 10th. Elementary are organized by grade, by teacher. Secondary will be organized by grade, by content, by teacher, and by period. You should print out the tickets and reuse them. Tickets should be stored in a secure, locked location between testing. Again, this year we'll have a daily access code that you'll need to sign into the test, and make sure the students get their own test ticket. That is critical. The daily access code, students will log on to Kite using their username and password, and that'll be the same for them every day. And then students will see a screen of which tests are available to them. After selecting that test, they'll be asked to type in a daily access code. You should secure those codes to your teachers in a secure fashion. Those codes should not be visible to students when they're not being tested. For example, don't leave the access codes on the whiteboard when teaching in class is not testing that day. All right, just an example of what the access codes will be. Say, for instance, for part 1, I'm taking part 1 of the ELA. I've used Strong 387. And then when I finish that, I'm going to take part 2. I'll use Avid 601. Our department will also create a folder on the shared drive that'll contain the daily access codes, and Mark typically emails them out the day before.
Yes.
To the test coordinators. If a student has text-to-speech selected on the P&P, they'll need to have headphones and earbuds. Text-to-speech is available to all students for instructions only instructions. Headphones, earbuds are required for DLM students. A couple students need the headphone set and microphone for the integrated headset portions. Not much new this year on the ELA math tests. Talk a little bit about the soft breaks.
Be real careful whenever you're doing tests. You move, there could be 2 parts to session 1 and 2 parts to session 2. Just be aware that after you move on, you can't go back and pick up any unanswered questions. And an unanswered question is a wrong answer.
Tell them a little bit about that process too, about checking for omitted items.
You can either go in there and look at the monitor screen for those, or you can go out there and run the report. It's a data extract that will show you the status of all those. But please check those before you allow a student to move on.
For ELA, there's 25 questions for each session. There's no delay between sessions 1 and 2. There's no listening piece. Recent arrivals, in other words, newcomers or EL students who arrived after March 18, 2023 are not required to take the ELA tests. They may, but they're not required to. Math, 30 questions. Again, there's no delay between sessions 1 and 2 like there used to be. Resource sheets will be available. We'll put them on the G drive for your school. Manipulative lifts hasn't changed. No or limited use of calculator on section 2 of both sessions. As far as calculators go, grades 3 through 5, none. 6 through 8, they have a 4-function scientific calculator and kite. Grade 10, they have a function and graphing calculator and kite. Handheld calculators are acceptable, but you must log the usage each and every time for each student. Again, science is basically unchanged. It's a fixed form. History and government, it's like last year. It's done in the classroom, it's scored locally. There's no exemptions, even DLM. Trying to hit that 95% participation rate. You don't have to test any new students after April 19th, 2024. If you have questions, contact Leslie Nelson at 4114. Tell them a little bit about the ACT stuff, Mark.
Okay, so we have a state ACT and a district ACT coming up. This probably won't affect you too much. The district one may, because it's during the CAP test window, and that'll be on April 9th this year. So as with every test, when you're in high school, counselors, please be very careful about reclassifying students. Ideally, you have them reclassified by Valentine's Day to keep your school out of trouble. Anything after that could pose some real problems, especially for the ACT, because the state will not pay for any student that's not a junior.
There are SC codes, special circumstances codes. They can only be entered by Mark. So send your request to him by email, along with your documentations. The codes are listed on pages 14 through 17 in the examiner's manual. They're due no later than April 12th. No exceptions, because that's KSD closes it down. All right, just a quick review. If a kid is suspended for 4 weeks or more in their general ed, and it overlaps their local testing window in kindergarten or elementary and middle school, or if it's high school, 4 weeks in the second semester, they're not required to be tested. You can send in an SC02 code. Just says the kid was suspended for less than 4 weeks, but they're still required to be tested. You can send one in for SPED. Again, even if you do, the kid's required to be tested. All right. To exclude a kid because of absences, you have to do the following. You must have filed a child in need of care petition or truancy papers filed with the county attorney via Dr. Grimes. Absences must occur during the first week of the local testing window, and absences must be for a minimum of 2 consecutive weeks prior to the local testing window. All right, documentation. We have to keep on file documentation for the need for text to speech. We create a Google sheet for each school that has all the students preloaded and the different options on there. So you make changes on the G drive, and then I'll upload those to KSDE. All right, text to speech basics must be documented in some type of student plan, regularly used for classroom and test, 50% of the time on classroom assignments, 100% of the time on classroom test. It must be more than a year below grade level, and we use the 20th percentile as a cutoff, either as a fast bridge or a MAP score. Just a quick overview of some text to speech options. The audio is available to all students on directions. Doesn't need a P&P. On science, it's available to everyone that doesn't need a P&P. Text to speech on test items, it's not available to all students. It is required on a P&P. Text to speech on the reading passages and test items, that is available for certain students, but KSD must approve it. Having a student read the assessment aloud to himself is not the same as having a TTS accommodation. A lot of times I find that's a pretty good choice. If they're doing that, reading aloud to themselves, they should be separated from the other students. If they don't have text to speech, they should not have headphones, except what?
A lot of times students want to block out the noise, so they can have the headphones in. It's just the other end of the headphones cannot be plugged into anything. So if they do that, just make sure that the plug is visible.
Got it. All right, during testing, proctors and teachers should verify students using Chromebooks or in the kiosk mode prior to opening the Kite student portal. iPads no longer require guided access. There should be no wireless peripherals or flash drives in the testing area. And teachers should actively proctor the test, looking for students who are cheating, clicking through answers, students are off task. There's a review end screen at the end of each session. We recommend that students raise their hand, the teacher goes over and verifies that all their questions have been answered. And there may be one or more reviews in screen during the soft breaks. All right. Test security, no changes here. You can't store or save on computers or any personal storage devices any test items. They cannot be shared by email. Never take a picture of a or movie of a test item, even if you think it contains an error. And do not allow the use of cell phones in a testing room for any reason. Sometimes you'll have a student that'll say, hey, there's no correct answer here, or there's 2 correct answers. Do not read the question to see if the student is correct. Say to the student, choose the answer that you think is best. There's one correct or best answer to each question. Carefully read the question and work the problem. You can take note of the test part, question number, student name, and report that to your building test coordinator, who will share it with the district testing coordinator. Don't call CETE unless Mark Saylor has asked you to do so. If you have any questions, direct them to either myself or to Mark Saylor. As a building test coordinator, you need to keep a copy of your building's test schedule and have it updated on the G Drive. We have a special folder for that. Keep a copy of your trainings. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, and then have access to your student plans. All right. As a building test coordinator, you're to test all your staff. We're doing an electronic version of the agreement to abide by the guidelines, so you won't have to store it manually anymore. Any test materials should be stored in a secure, locked area. Report any breach of test security or lost materials to Mark Saylor, or if you're in a pinch, to me, but mainly Mark Saylor, and he'll take care of the problem. I'm going to talk again about this, about monitoring.
Most of you are familiar with this, but when you go into Kite under test coordination, you'll have a monitor screen. And then you just pull up the test and the session that you're in. Anybody that doesn't have a colored circle, that tells you they have unanswered questions. But my preference and your preference should be running that test export. Because that gives that way you can see everybody at once.
Reactivations. If you reactivate a student, we ask you to log that in a reactivation log that we'll put out there on the G Drive. You'll have the student's name, state ID, grade, subject, test part, date and time, reason for doing it, person who did the reactivation, and again, the log will be on the G Drive. All right, who may you reactivate? Students who omitted items or student didn't finish the test due to illness, time constraints, etc. Students should be monitored so that they're just answering omitted items and not going back and reviewing past items. Once a student status is marked as complete, you can't reactivate them. All right, these are not valid reasons for reactivating a student. Kid just went click through at random. It's bad, but you can't reactivate them. So if you see a student doing that, best thing to do is stop the student at that point. Have them close out the test, see if you can get them motivated to behave differently the next day. All building level personnel must be trained in test security before the local testing begins. You have to be a member of school district, an employee of the school district, in order to help administer a test. And there is an online questionnaire once they finish the test or finish their test security training on the G Drive. Test schedules. Talk about this.
I need to have those so I can upload those into Kite. The issue with this is if KSDE would want to come pay you a visit, that they pick the day and they know that you're testing, so you better be testing, or there could be some issues there. So the other thing is it helps to determine how many servers the CETE puts online for certain days. They try to avoid that, having too many servers online. It helps us too, as far as distributing bandwidth between the buildings.
All right, your schedule should include specific dates, the actual testing times, the teacher grade levels, and the room numbers. It's nice to tell us what you're testing as well. All right, in terms of room or lab prep, have appropriate manipulatives available for science and math. Student use is optional. Remove and cover any bulletin board displays, fact tables, etc. Anything that could help a student during the test. No one may view the test items before, during, or after the test. Test materials may not be copied, reproduced, or photographed, or paraphrased. That's an important point. Kid says, I can't understand this question. You can't go over there and say, well, what they're really asking is, and then explain it to them. After the test, the teacher should, or proctor should collect all student notes, scratch paper, etc., and destroy them. Test tickets should be destroyed after the completion of the test. And they've completed that particular subject. And I'd sanitize mementos as per building guidelines. All right, teachers should read the following in the examiner's manual. Again, we set it up so that when they go to do their test security, there's a link for them on the G Drive, and it tells them what pages to read. And at the end of it, it has a little questionnaire for them to fill out. Part of what they read is a document prepared by KSDE that talks about acceptable and unacceptable practices, reporting, how to report information on test security and item issues. Teachers as well as proctors should carefully read this document. If you have a monitor visit, the monitor team will ask to see a copy of your signed agreements. Again, for the vast majority of you, that will be online in the G Drive. All right, some key points. As boring as they are, you have to read the direction, the scripts out of the examiner's manual. You can't respond to student questions that would help them understand the question, aid in responding to an item, advise, encourage student to edit or change a response. You can't direct students or prompt them to use certain strategies. At the beginning of a test session or during the test, you could remind them the day before, but not the day of the test. Once you've begun testing in a subject, you may not have any teaching or practicing of tested indicators or reviews of the students who are currently taking state assessment in that subject. You can't coach or cue students in any way during test administration. This includes gestures and facial expressions. You can't tell students or let them know whether an answer is correct. You may not ask students how they got an answer. Teachers and staff may not tell students to redo or review any part of the test. Students cannot be required to use scratch paper. They may, but they can't be required to use it. And you can't grade scratch paper. Don't give the meanings of words in the text or questions. Boy, that's, you just handle things differently when you're doing a regular classroom test. But on these, you can't. Teachers and staff may not read anything from the reading passage, in other words, the story, to students. Except for the reading passages, teachers and proctors may pronounce isolated words or phrases that are in the questions when requested by a student. Mark and I cannot write enough rules to cover every situation. Bottom line, think about the following. Would this appear to be unethical to an outsider? Could the newspaper or TV make this into a story? What does my conscience say? If your actions, cues, facial expressions, etc., encourages a student to make a certain answer choice or to redo it, it's wrong. KSDE will be again conducting monitor visits to about 5 to 10% of the schools in the state. They use an adaptation of the NAEP checklist. Mark Saylor and the building tests Mark Saylor, the building test coordinator, walked down testing areas prior to the actual monitor visit. And this is just kind of what it looks like. All right. If you have questions.
I have updated the frequently asked questions document, and that will be out there in your folder. So hopefully that will head off a lot of the questions that you have. If not, you can always call me. I'm here for you. I mean, that's what I'm here to support the schools. So just give me a call.
All right. Good luck.